Hello YouTube, Dave here again. One of my favorite YouTubers to follow right now is an individual by the name of Pro Jared. He focuses mainly on video game stuff, but he has been lately doing videos more and more on Dungeons and Dragons. Every year on December he actually dedicates the entire month to what he calls D&December. And I always thought it was a really cool concept, but it's not something that I can really do because my channel is pretty much focused on D&D all year round. But it is great to see a much larger YouTuber be able to raise awareness for D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, with a much wider range of audience than what I could possibly do. But this year's a little bit different, and this year he's following a tweet from a cosplayer, I believe, who goes by the name of Scarlet Moth, and she created a list of things to talk about each and every day throughout the month of December for D&D. Now, it could be talking points or things to inspire you to do artwork or things like that. Now, I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. I also don't think I'm going to be covering every single option that is on the list, because they have one for all 31 days. But there are some ones that I really do want to talk about, and I thought I would start by going through the first 3 days worth of prompts all in one go here, just because the first 2 days are going to be pretty easy. I will include a link to the tweet below, so you can kind of check it out. And if any of you are YouTubers yourselves, or you're looking to make videos, then I would recommend using that as sort of a starting point and just making some D&D related videos. So the first 3 days, so for December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, which I'm doing all in one video, is December 1st is what is your favorite race, December 2nd is what is your favorite class, and December 3rd is what is your favorite NPC. So I'm going to start with the first two because they're going to be pretty easy to answer, and I think anybody that's been paying attention or has played run D&D games for me in the past will probably know the answers to this. But as far as the races go, now my answer is not the first thing I ever played. A lot of people, when they may play their first character, that's sort of like the thing that they always keep going back to. The first character I ever made was a first level human fighter, and that's not really my main interest. But what my favorite race has become is the elves. So elves have been my favorite race for a little while now, and I always liked, the idea of playing like archer characters and or even spellcasters, because I did play a few mages way back in the 2nd edition AD&D days, and I always liked the idea of just being an elf for a lot of those. Starting with 3rd edition, I really made a lot of elven archer themed characters. So elf has pretty much always been my favorite, with my favorite sub-race of elves having to be the wood elves. The typical, dexterity and, the one that's good at, being an archer, the more martially oriented of the elves, because the high elf to me always felt like, sort of like the wizard or the arcane character. Like this to me is a high elf, whereas, a wood elf is, let's see if there is a picture in here that works really well. Well, to me that's a bit more of a wood elf, although the skin's a little purpley. But anyway, so elves have always been, or for a long time now, have been my favorite race. And my favorite class, I don't know why I closed the book because I was just on it. My favorite class to play is the Ranger. And for me, this didn't actually start. I didn't have really a favorite class until later on in my 3rd edition days as a player. Probably around the time the 3.5 came out is actually when I really started to like the Ranger specifically. Before that, I was more or less into playing fighters, so I played some elven fighters before for like archery and stuff like that. But I really started to like the idea of the Ranger class, even though the Ranger class has always sort of had its issues, especially in 3rd edition, like 3.0, they were horrible. 3.5 fixed them a fair amount, and you know, I never got a chance to play one in 4th edition, but I did like the way that they looked. And I actually don't mind the way that Rangers are now. I know that they don't have like favorite enemy damage bonuses or stuff like that, but I always still just really, really loved the Ranger class. And for me, I just like the idea of the woodland survivor, you know, the guide kind of character. And to me, everything that I'd want to play is kind of encapsulated by that Ranger class. So that was my favorite race and class. My favorite NPC, and there's a reason that I have this, and the thumbnail is going to be a spoiler if you've played through this campaign before. But first of all, starting off with NPCs in general, there's quite a few that I've really enjoyed over the years, and actually 2 of my favorite NPCs of all time are both in the Shackled City adventure path. But as far as my homemade characters are concerned, I'm not good with names at all. Like, I'm really terrible with them, so I tend to reuse names a lot when I create campaigns, and I tend to have the characters with the similar names in a similar role, so that, you know, it kind of creates a little bit of familiarity type of thing. For example, for me, and you would have seen this name if you followed my Goblin Week videos, so one of the main sort of party patrons or like benevolent benefactors for the player characters that I've always used as an NPC is an individual by the name of D&December, and I don't know where I came up with that name. I probably found like it on random charts, but I just really liked it so much, and that I just kept using him in some roles. Although there was one campaign where I actually flipped the switch on him, and he would end up turning out to be the actual main villain, but nobody kind of knew that, and I just, you know, used the name, and I didn't even realize that, you know, the players were picking up on the fact that I kept using this individual's name as sort of like the same patron type of character for the players. My very first major villain that I ever created, that I've used a few times but never actually got a chance to have the player characters face in a battle, was an elven lich by the name of Elkar. And going back even to my 2nd edition campaigns, he was someone that I had used in one of my 2nd edition campaigns, and then when I ported over to 3rd edition, he was the first major villain that I used there, and he was just this ancient lich, and he was one of those individuals that enjoyed, more or less, it was more about the chase than, you know, the actual success. He had become so bored, having, you know, been alive for centuries and centuries and centuries, that he just wants to challenge groups of adventurers, and that was his whole thing, was just to see how much he could push some of them. And you know, I always thought he was kind of an interesting villain, but I never ever got to use him in any sort of climactic situation. The campaigns just never lasted long enough. Things like burnout or job schedules or things like that prevented me from getting to use him. Another NPC that I really, or villain that I used a few times, was an individual by the name of Kanan. And for anyone who's wondering, it is a blend of 2 different names. The first part is an homage to one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, Kane. Just again, one of my all-time favorites. I've always loved him from like the moment he debuted. So between like him and the Undertaker, my 2 top favorites, but his name kind of lent itself more to a villainous character. So Kane was the first part, and then where it comes into Kanan was sort of an homage to one of my favorite singers, actually, which is Maynard James Keenan from Tool. So I just kind of put the first part of Kane's name, the last part of Maynard James Keenan's last name together, and created him. And he had a few different characterizations, but he was typically I seem to use Undead a lot, but he. So yeah, so I always had him as a Death Knight, like a fallen paladin. He was usually typically a tragic character, and I actually want to go back and remake him using the Oath of Conquest paladin from Xanathar's Guide to Everything at some point, because I think that'd be kind of cool. But my all-time absolute favorite NPC that I've ever ran, and I'll save the second one that's also in this book for maybe another video. But one of my all-time favorites has to be, once I find him here. Alright, found him. So my favorite NPC that I think I've ever run has to be Crazy Jared, and I am sorry that I'm having a character by the name of Crazy Jared in the video that was kind of inspired by Pro Jared. Two completely separate things, I assure you, but I just loved Crazy Jared, and the reaction that he got from my players when I was running the adventure or the encounter was so good that I had to reuse him. And I reused him in pretty much the exact same way in a future campaign, and it still got the same reaction, which was great. So before encountering Crazy Jared, the player characters come across this small little home, basically just like a wooden, almost like a little wooden cottage type of thing. But surrounding it is this fence. And the fence has some kind of like stuffed burlap blocks that are stacked in such a way to look like guard towers. And when the player characters kind of come across this, it's a place that's meant to look like a really interesting sort of makeshift castle. And when the players approach, you see this old man running out, screaming at the player characters as he's being chased by this red dragon, which you see back here. And just the line, "Onward, my knights, for Andoria." And you know, so basically, Crazy Jared is someone who is afflicted with some form of madness, and he believes that he is the king of a fictional land referred to as Andoria, and he is locked in an epic battle against the demon queen of Keltos. So when the player characters arrive, he believes that the red dragon was sent by the demon queen of Keltos to destroy his kingdom. And when the players arrive, they are obviously his knights. So he calls out to them, and you know, basically after the battle's over, he uses an ability uses an item called the Rod of Splendor, and he uses that to change his clothing, which was like tattered robes and, you know, rags and stuff like that, and he changes it to look like, you know, the regal clothing of a king. And it's just this illusionary effect. And then he uses hallucinatory terrain after the battle to create sort of the kingdom of Andoria with like rolling hills and, you know, fields that are ready for harvest, and making it look like this ideal place. And he was just insane. Like, he was just crazy. And everything was a machination of this demon queen of Keltos. And the player characters try to get information from him, and he does steer them in the right direction, but at the same time, just he keeps bringing up this fictional place. And you know, how he will, because the players are off on their own thing, so he provides his knights, you know, permission for leave to pursue their quests, which is, you know, what the player characters are doing obviously has to do with bringing down this non-existent demon queen of Keltos. So I just loved him so much, and he just had such a blast running him. And one of the players in particular just could not contain himself, and just kept losing it. And trying to make this guy look crazy, and you know, he was. But it was just such a great time, such a fond memory, and I love this campaign to death. And the fact that something like that, something as creative as that kind of character was in there, is one of the reasons that I love it so much. But that is my favorite NPC of all time, would have to be Crazy Jared from the Shackled City campaign path in Dungeon Magazine. In the magazine, it was chapter number 3. Which is the Zenith Trajectory was the name of the chapter, and it's the adventure part number 4 in this. But anyway, he was my absolute favorite NPC that I've ever run. So let me know, you guys, in the comments below, what were some of your favorite NPCs that you've ever encountered or ran as a dungeon master, or that you've encountered as a player. And again, if you are someone that has their own active YouTube channel or considering starting up a YouTube channel, then follow the tweet, which I'll put on in the description below. And you know, just see if any of those create some inspiration. I would love to see some video responses to like favorite NPCs. I'm not going to go through and do like the whole tag thing, because this is one of those things that, you know, if you're interested, then I'd love to see your responses. And if you do make a video response to this, and you do a video about your favorite NPC, let me know, and I will definitely watch it. So anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.